Alrighty, I'd like to welcome to the stage now Tim Buzza from Attune, who's going to take us through the absenteeism and attrition section. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
As we're sitting down, for those of you who follow Tim on LinkedIn, you haven't been in Australia much. Where have you been?
No, actually, to give a bit of context to this answer, so Attune is a schedule flexibility app. So our passion is enabling people to live their dreams and have their dream career at the same time. So what that's been looking like for me is I've spent most of the last year, we bought a car in India, a four-wheel drive, and have been driving across the Himalayas, getting police escorts, or actually army escorts in Kashmir, driving over mountain passes where we had to use oxygen because we're at over 18,000 feet. And all whilst doing that, I was working full-time, starting up a new company and selling Attune to the Australian call centre industry. So it's been a great journey. Now I'm living in Athens, starting my next adventure, learning how to sail. So yeah, we live the promise.
Fantastic, not a dull moment. Well, this data is always interesting, Tim. So let's start off with absenteeism first. We can see that in 2021 across the industry it was 10%. Things improved to 9% in our last report, but we've gone backwards.
Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic result, and one thing that really jumps out, you'll see on this report, is that there is a correlation between the absenteeism and the size of the call centre. So call centres less than 100 FTE or 100 heads are tracking between 12 and 13%. Between 100 and 100 and 300, it's 14, 15%. And then once you get over 300, it jumps right up to 18%. So that's a massive, really strong correlation. So something's happening there. There's also one other interesting stat that's in the report, which is that there's a big gap between the top and the worst performers in our industry. So there's some people out there who are doing an exceptionally good job with absenteeism. The best performing 15% of contact centres in Australia are getting 7% or less. So that's a great number. But the worst performing, the top 11%, they're actually getting over 25% absenteeism. So we've got more than 10% of the industry sitting above 25%. So there's a big gap, and certainly a sign that some are adapting to the shift in employee expectations post-COVID, and others that are finding that more challenging.
Why do you think historically our industry has had such high absenteeism?
Yeah, I think the call centre role has had particular challenges attached to it historically, and those challenges are starting to be addressed. But ultimately, it's going to come down to how we engage our employees, and that's no secret. And as we can see, clearly the large call centres are struggling to engage their employees compared to the small call centres. And engagement is not rocket science to us or any of us now in this industry. It's a challenge we've all been leaning into, but it doesn't mean that it's easy to solve. So we know that employees want to feel valued and appreciated. We know they want to feel a sense of belonging. They know that it's important to have human connection. We know that employees want flexibility and they want to be able to fit work into their lives. So we know what we need to do, but for some of us, it's quite a challenge to lean into.
Yep. So peak absenteeism is a measure we record, and what peak absenteeism means is, at one point throughout the year, when your absenteeism really skyrocketed, what did it hit? And again, we've seen that go up significantly over the last 12 months. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's no correlation here between the size of the call centre. So statistically, that points to that there must have been a common experience across the whole industry that drove that peak absenteeism over the last 12 months. And there's no surprise, and we'll see on the next slide, that was people sick and COVID. So COVID jumps out as one of the main drivers of peak absenteeism. Just jump to the next slide. Yep.
I just want to clarify, because the questions come through about how we measure. So this is on any given day. This is on any given day, 25% of the workforce is absent.
Yeah, so there it is, seasonal illness and COVID right at the top there, clearly at the top. So that was a difficult time last year when COVID ran through our community, and we all experienced the pain of that. There's one other stat that I want to celebrate, which is that if you look down the bottom there, increased mental health leave has dropped from 7% down to 2%. So that's a huge win, and I know that's a challenge that as call centre managers and executives, we've all been struggling with since even before COVID. It was one of the biggest challenges facing the industry. So I think that's something we should all celebrate, that I think through COVID, one of the benefits is that everybody inside the organisation has grown awareness on the importance of looking after each other's and our own mental health, and that increased focus is coming through in a really positive way here.
So we've identified the problem. What are some of the solutions that the report finds?
Yeah, so flexibility is key right now, and we're in a tough recruitment market, and those that are distinguishing themselves are offering work from home. It's definitely something that the market is asking for. We'll go through in more detail in future sessions later this afternoon, where we can see really clearly that that's what candidates are asking for. And where we have flexibility around working from home, and interestingly, flexibility around rosters. So that's jumping out really strongly here. In fact, even more impactful than being able to work from home is our ability to offer schedule flexibility.
So moving from absenteeism to attrition, we've just had the year of the Great Resignation. Industry average for attrition has gone up. But again, we're seeing a really big correlation. If you have a look at the stats there, contact centres, the large contact centres have really had it far worse. Why are larger contact centres having worse absenteeism and worse attrition than small ones?
Yeah.
Please, can you answer that for us?
I would love to. Actually, this afternoon we've got a great session on employee engagement. So the simple, reality is that when we have strong employee engagement, we're going to see improvements in absenteeism and attrition. So there's some fantastic results in that report, in the session this afternoon, that probably worth paying extra attention to, because it definitely correlates back to our absenteeism and attrition. Absenteeism is definitely a lead indicator for attrition. So if we're seeing, it's not surprising that it's a similar correlation and a similar trend between the two figures.
So just looking at some of the questions that have come through, somebody's asked, is there a difference between in-sourced and outsourced centres in terms of this data? From a report point of view, we haven't differentiated the two yet. A little bit of it is around making sure we've got enough responses for each individual group. But what's your analysis in terms of your experience, Tim? Are in-sourced contact centres generally doing better in those areas than outsourced?
Yeah, generally. Yeah, to be fair, I've worked in both sides of that question, and the reality is in outsourcing it's incredibly challenging. You're running very tight margins, and so you just don't have as many tools at your disposal to engage your employees. But at the same time, there's probably more focus in outsourcing as well, because the impact of absenteeism on the bottom line is felt more strongly. So, it's sort of horses and courses. I think there's probably some great performers on both outsourcing and in-house call centres. So I wouldn't say that's a general truth, but yeah, on the whole.
So when an agent leaves a contact centre, they don't always move externally though. What are your thoughts on where agents go when they're leaving our centres?
Yeah, isn't this a good news story, and also a sign of the challenge that we're all facing? I think the good news here is that call centres, despite the fact that nearly 60% of call centre roles are working from home, they're still performing as the talent incubators for the business. They're still offering as the front door for people to build their careers from, even though they're working from home. And I know when we all started to go working from home, that was our big concern, that we would lose that value proposition for our people, that call centres would stop being that career first step that would then build a career within the organisation. But that's still happening. 26% of people are pursuing a different career or moving within the organisation. But we are still seeing the Great Resignation being felt. I don't think it's gone away. And look at myself, I'm an example. I sat at home during COVID and thought, what is it I value the most? What are the things that I want to achieve in my life, personally and professionally? How can I make that happen? And for me, that was extreme, obviously driving across Himalayas, doing crazy things. But for everybody, that's something. We've all reassessed what the priority stack is in our life. And because of that reassessment, we're now valuing things like spending quality time with our loved ones, connecting with those that we love the most, doing the things that we love the most. And if a job doesn't support that, then people are just going to move on.
Rostering flexibility is going to come up a few times today. Why do you think it has had such a big impact if we look at the change in responses there to the same question year on year? Why is it having such an impact on why frontline agents do or don't leave their current jobs?
It's interesting. I've probably got one main thought on that is that before COVID and post-COVID, we were all trying to address absenteeism and attrition, but kind of with one hand behind our back. So there's two buckets of initiatives that I see that we have at our disposal. One is the ability to deploy initiatives that will improve the experience on the job so that people will want to come to work. And we've been working in that space a lot in the industry, trying to find ways to make the job better. Years ago, it was about providing pizza and fruit on Friday afternoons, and we've come a long way with gamification and employee engagement programs and initiatives to improve the experience on the job. And that's been a big focus. But now there's a second bucket of initiatives available, which is how do we make the job fit into people's lives better? And that starts with work from home, and we've now moved to that to collectively as an industry. But there's more tools coming into the market that we've now got at our disposal that enable us to solve for that. And if we can do both those things, enable work to fit into people's lives better and also make the experience on the job better, then we're going to create a more attractive role and people are going to stick around.
Tim, take us through the key findings for this chapter.
Yeah, so the gap between the best and the worst is growing, and that's something we all should be worried about. I think events like this are really important, so I think sharing across the industry so that we're all learning from each other is something we need to lean into. There's a bit of a history of us of all commercial industries being somewhat competitive. I think when it comes to employee experience, that's something that I think we can open our doors on more and learn from the best and share more. COVID is over, but we're not going backwards. So we're hearing stories like the one we just heard before about businesses mandating people to come back into the office more and more. I am nervous about that because I think it's not listening to what people want. And ultimately, industries, we will continue to see this gap widening where people are providing a fantastic employee experience, being increasingly flexible, and at the same time delivering a great on-the-job experiencing and enabling career paths and great work futures, and others that are falling back into the trap of trying to go back to the old. And I think that they are going to be the losers.
A lot of questions come through, Tim, probably about 20. So let me just pick out a couple because we've only got a minute or two. Grant's asked, do you think the higher absenteeism in larger centres is because of the perception that they don't make a difference? I mean, probably the individual doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, so I touched on before, one of the most important drivers of engagement in a workplace is a sense of belonging. So if it's a large workplace, it's logical to think that somebody could feel lost in the crowd, not identified, not valued, not appreciated. So when it's a small business, that's obviously much easier to create that feeling in the environment. So in a large business, I think the pressure falls more on the leaders who are communicating with their people on a regular basis to make sure that sentiment is being conveyed. So yeah, I agree with the premise of that question that it's highly likely that that's one of the key drivers.
Well, if you want to chat further with Tim or his colleague Elliot during the break or this afternoon, he'll be hanging around. But ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and thank Tim from Attune.
Thank you very much.